Okay, well, sorry, audience, but Jess and I have already started this conversation, so we better hit record now and just go for it. This is Jess Keating, and we made friends on Instagram because we are very much like-minded about how we see business and money and spirituality and just a fun gift of gab that we have together. So, Jess, would you please introduce yourself and what you do and how you got here?
Absolutely. I was born no, I'm just kidding. My name is Jess Keating. I'm going to do the fancy version. Okay. So like,
Okay.
here we go. I am a best-selling author. I am a scientist and I am a creative money mindset mentor who helps visionary creatives and entrepreneurs do all of the inside work to release their deepest blocks to creating, sharing, selling, and scaling the work of their heart. And the way I like to do that is to help them do all of this beautiful, well-rounded science/spirituality work to help them build a generative living business that is truly reflective of their self-expression. So it feels one of a kind. It feels very much connected to who they are on like a soul or creative level. And I like to do it in a way that also helps them make a ton of money in a way that feels perfect for them. Boom.
By the way, Jess, you are a one of a kind.
Oh, thank you. You are as
And
well.
because I love your whole entire business model because it really aligns exactly with where my heart is right now with the way the industry works, the way people are working, the way we want to create, but we want to create something that's really special and unique. And we've been talking about these coaches and the business push industry of follow this exact formula
Yeah.
and then turn around and teach this exact formula. And it's just kind of, as
It's
we've said,
boring.
it's all bullshit. And
It's
we've got to be
boring.
able to come up with our own way and our own path. And so you give that opportunity to people. And my favorite thing is mixing the science and spirituality because I love both. And I don't
Yes.
think that I could find my spiritual side of myself without the more analytical science side of myself because
Yep.
I'm a big, huge doubter. Like I want
Yeah,
to
that's okay
challenge
though.
everything, but then I realize that there's so much magic around us. So like I like to be able to tap into it. And you have all of that packaged in one. And you started as an amazing creative person writing books. So you've got that
Well,
whole
thank
arc
you.
of actual experience and actual knowledge that you can actually implement in other people's lives. And I am emphasizing this because we've laughed a lot about how many
Yeah.
people have never built a business and yet they're teaching people how to build a business. Makes no
Yeah.
sense.
Everybody has skills, right? It's just you need to, I think, allow yourself the freedom to own what yours are. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling like, oh, I should do this though, because like this is what sells or whatever, turn that voice off. Ignore that. You do have skills. You do have the ability to create something incredible with your like creative intuition and your voice and all that. But I think it's a good premise to begin with because I know a lot of the people listening are probably tangentially related to a lot of those voices that are telling them like, here's the way to do things. And I'll tell you, one of the best things that I've ever done for my life, just in general, to create like a richer life, but also business, is consistently remind myself that what works across the board doesn't matter. It's what I want and it's what works for me. And I'll tell you, the hard part, it's one thing to say that, right? Like cross stitch that on a freaking pillow and like you're done. It's one thing to say it, I wish, right? Like put it in the back behind me or something. But actually implementing that is where the work of people like me comes in because it is going to push against every single like inner trauma, inner block, all of those buttons that you have holding you back from that self-expression. People always say like, "Oh, I want to find myself." Like you don't have to find yourself. You have to see yourself fully and allow that to be enough. But that like and I don't even want to say that as though like it's an easy thing. It's not.
No, but
But,
that's why I renamed everything to Made
yeah,
Remarkable.
yeah,
That aha moment that I had this year that really released a lot of my old demons of I am okay as who I am. Let's lean
yeah.
into that. And I want everyone else to know that you are made remarkable. Literally, you don't have to become anything. There's no
Yeah.
like big, massive transformation waiting
No,
on a better
there
side
won't
of
be.
you.
There
No,
just won't
it's
be.
just
It's all going to be
a
these
long
iterative
growth.
growth. Yeah.
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 And
No,
as we
I'm
were
glad you mentioned
saying,
Made Remarkable.
yeah, as you were saying, like as we were saying before, I finally was like, okay, we better just hit
Yeah.
record. Is it's planting the seed and growing the tree, and then the apple will come. But it's not like you can just magically have the apple be there. Like that's just not
No, you can't.
normally how. If you really want to grow something, otherwise you're going to get one or two apples and not a whole tree full of apples. Like
Yeah.
I know it's
Or
such a
you would just take
typical, and
somebody else's apple. Yeah.
otherwise you're just
No.
Or you might.
Well, so that's the thing. Yeah, I know.
There you go. Let's go all the way in the ethics of the business. But
Things
yes.
that I like to do with my people, I call them money wakers. Like my flagship program is Creative Money Awakening. And I think about like creative mastery, money healing, and spiritual awakening. Like that's where that comes from. But one of the things that I really like to emphasize is I prefer a worldview of business and creativity that works with nature. And I know like that shouldn't sound radical, but I know like in the world that we're in, like the idea of like how do we sort of transplant natural function and natural growth and generative processes onto a business. I know it can actually sound like quite woo or whatever, but in my mind, the creative process is seen its best in nature, right? Like that idea. And one of the
Literally.
things, like I'm glad you mentioned the Apple thing because it sparked this like thought for me. We have this like almost obsession with creating ease, right? Let it be easy. And I have no problem with that phrase because I think that we do often make things harder than they need to be, 100%. And that's our stress response is happening. That's our self sabotage. That's our traumas and all those little inner wounds and blocks that I help people deal with. We do make things harder. But I also want to say, as a creative, our generative living force is naturally going to be a sort of friction because we are not just taking someone else's apple and being like, here's an apple. We are trying to plant something and grow something, and growth takes not only time, but when it comes to like creative ideas and like business and stuff, it's going to take that like rubbing together of different ideas to hopefully create a spark that will in us be like, oh, here's how I want to do like set up my business strategy, or here's the kind of offer I want to take. But I really have to caution people, especially people who I'm assuming if they're listening they identify as like creative souls, to not take the feeling of tension or that feeling of like discomfort as a bad sign. And it's not just because like, oh, growth is uncomfortable. It's because like you, my friend, are a freaking creative. And that means that by necessity, things need to be like kind of frictiony and rubbing against each other so you can find those next steps for you. So like I don't mind let it be easy, but I also hope that people don't interpret that as something wrong with themselves if they're listening and thinking like, you know what, thus far it's been really hard because sometimes it is. And I think a lot of the problematic issues can come in when we have messaging like, you know, oh, if you're just aligned, it will be so easy. If you're staying in with your integrity, it'll be so easy. If you stay with whatever you're naturally good at doing, it'll be easy. And like it
Well,
will be
those are all
easy
the
at
buzzwords
times.
that people are using in
Yeah, to sell
industry
their
that makes you
whatever.
feel like, well, if it's not going right, then I must have done something wrong. Well, let's
Yeah,
just be honest. It's not easy. If we can
it's
just
not.
start admitting it,
Not
it's
easy.
not easy. We can do something with ease, but that's not the
Yep.
same as easy.
Yeah.
And so it's like really like, how many years did it take for us to get here? A couple of
Oh
decades.
God. Like,
Like
oh,
if you
easily.
a
Easily.
couple of
Yeah.
decades. So I'm not saying it has
Many
to take that
careers have
long,
come
but
here.
many. And so if you
Many.
think about it, like if you've just started this creative journey and you're just learning how to make art now, the time is probably not right to be selling. Take some time
Yeah.
to actually
And
master
that's
the
okay.
craft.
And that's
It's okay.
okay.
Fine, you can always lean into what you're most talented with, what you're
Mhm.
most excited about. Like you said, it's not a one size fits all, but I think that's kind of why I've like created this whole 100 ways to make money as an artist
Mm.
without selling your art so that people
Without selling
see
your
there are
art. Yeah.
so many options. But yeah, it takes it takes a lot of time, people.
It
And that's
does. And
okay.
that's
And
not
that's part of the
like a
fun
fault.
sometimes, isn't it? Don't you
It
find
is.
it fun? Like,
It
all
is.
right,
Well, and I like
for
to
me, it's
think
problem
like
solving.
I think of it as problem solving, and I think of it for me like my everything about like the work that I do, it's very exploratory. Like I actually think of myself like with the machete, like Indiana Jones style, like going through the creative like realms and stuff and kind of tapping into those things, pulling them out and trying to make something out of what seems to be nothing. And I mean, I'm fortunate in that I have a really grounded scientific background. So I can understand like the neurological and physical, like nervous system components to creativity, but I also have like a shamanic and spiritual background to help kind of ground me in both of those realms. But it also took years to help them kind of work together, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes like it's nothing that you can knowledge your way out of, right? Like I'm highly knowledgeable, but that's not it. It's the experience of walking that path and be able to recognize, okay, usually at this point in the creative process, I want to like jump out a window. You know, like when I was writing novels, I don't write as many novels now, but like I would have by like you could set a clock by my like creative process. The minute I hit 30,000 words, finally the world made sense again. Whereas like up until that point, I doubted everything, every second of my life. It was like I'm doing everything wrong. Like this is garbage and this is this. And my husband would be like, "What's your word count?" And I'd be like, 25,000. He's like, "So 5,000 more to go." Right? Like, and it's like that for any type of creative work you do. It's not always going to be the same, but you can definitely know yourself and recognize like, oh, here's where I'm going to start probably feeling imposter syndrome. Or here's where I'm going to start going on Instagram and feeling like resentful towards Kellee and her business because it's so much better than mine, blah, 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 blah. Right. Like all of these things that we do inside our heads. And
Right.
my work, I aim to help people partner with those feelings and use them because they are like really helpful allies. Like I hate when I hear people say, like, oh, crush your inner critic or like whatever. And it's like, no, your inner critic is a protector and it is doing what it has done for years or
Yeah.
evolutionarily like millions of
Millions.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
keeping
right?
you
Like
safe.
exactly. And like it is not the problem. It like you're self-sabotaging, you know, behaviors or procrastination or anything like that. That is not a problem. That means that you function in a healthy way. It's all
It's
the like success is just change, right? And your body will at every turn try to get you away from any sort of change, better or worse. So our job then becomes partnering with ourselves, with our spirit, with our bodies, and like that's where I get really, really nerdy because like it's such a beautiful, right? Like because you can't work in one realm alone. And I remember like I think we talked about this the last time actually, Kellee. I remember I had like a weird moment where I felt like there was no place for me because I was so deeply entrenched in both realms, if that makes sense.
this
Because
is
it's
this is
right.
this living in duality is really a big struggle for a lot of people. I know it's a
It
struggle
is.
for me. It's like trying to figure out how you live in both spaces, that
Yeah.
creative, that real, the real
Well, the
tangible
3D
world.
world. Yeah. It was like five
Yeah,
cars.
right.
It's hard.
How do you balance like this physical need to actually need money and also the desire to create? And is it holy or
Enlightened.
isn't it so wrong to want to make money from something that we're creative of? Like people
Oh
really
God, no.
actually have
That
these
is
thoughts
something
all
I
the
deal with that a
time.
lot. I deal with that a lot with my women, especially. Like, because what's the first thing we say when somebody wants more? Like, oh, be thankful for what you have, though. And I
Mm,
mean, you can definitely be thankful. What I tend to notice though is that in most women in particular, especially like the caregivers and like stuff like that, they have weaponized gratitude against themselves.
yes,
And I
I see
would like
this
to point,
too.
this is actually a really good like little moment to kind of benchmark this or bookmark this part because people always, you know, they come to me because they want to build like a living business, right? That feels beautiful and wonderful and lush and all that stuff. But then they're like, oh, but who am I to want more? And it's like, look to nature. You're not going to see a tree be like, you know what? I'm done growing. Like, right? They will
Yes.
stop growing if they need to. If their resources aren't right, they have to go within, they pull back. That's fine. But like, ambition,
But
especially as women, is not a dirty word,
yeah, no one
you
wants to be a
know?
dead tree.
No, right? Like it's like it is okay to look at your life and be like, I love everything about my life, and yet I also want so much more. And we have been taught as women in particular, like that is more is a dirty word. Like
Right.
it's too ambitious, it's too bold, like, oh well, it's gonna be impossible. What are you gonna have to sacrifice? And it's like there will always be like, you know, push and pull and stuff. But balance is meant to be found in movement. You're never gonna be like, I'm done. Like, here's my life in balance. Balance always is doing this, right? You're on the little tightrope thing. So it's okay to keep reaching for more. And I know that there's somebody listening right now who I'm hoping is at least allowing themselves maybe 1% more to want something. Because again, like we can go out with the biggest dreams in the world if we don't ever fully allow our relationship with our goals or our ambitions to feel safe to us or to feel like we're not jerks for wanting that stuff, we will self sabotage it. Like, remember what I was saying about like your brain will just like detour you away. Because if you see like subconsciously think that, oh, people who have $1 million, they're all wealthy jerks, you will not want to become what you despise, right? Like you can
Exactly.
want it all you want, but you will never allow yourself the safety to create that. Like
Right. And
it's so
no,
deep.
we've been probably like heard enough of that growing up, but I think even the young Gen Z generation is even more inundated of eat the rich, you know? So
Yeah.
we
Oh
have
yeah. Big
this
time.
idea that anyone who has money must be awful, and wanting
Yeah.
more means you're ungrateful and that you can't just be happy with what you have. And there's this fine balance of knowing that gratitude does bring joy when we
Mhm.
look at our life and we feel wholly satisfied and complete with what we have and still wanting more. that
Yeah.
means that we're in a place where we're actually going to thrive.
Yeah.
And you're right, women especially, but even men really
Hmm.
struggle with that idea of wanting, deserving, and asking for more. But how do you build a business if you're not willing to allow abundance in?
That,
I
well,
mean,
that, and that's the push
possible.
pull,
That
right?
is
Like
the
we
push
have this
pull.
deep desire as creative people. We are here to, we know what we're here for. And whether or not you can put words on it doesn't matter. You know, if you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, there's some mountaintop drawing my attention. We know. And yet you have your creative soul or spirit saying, like, let's do this. But your body and your sensibilities and your thoughts are being like, oh, but who are you to want this? Who are you to do this? You're not an expert at this. You can't do all of this crap. Like those mechanisms, like you've got the magnet of the goal, and then your own self, the magnet of like, no, no, stay the same, stay the same. Don't be too loud, don't be too big, don't be too soft, don't be too whatever, because that's too much. Or
Can,
alternatively, you're not enough,
can I
right?
tell you what my final snap was last year when I
Yes.
finally had an aha? Who am I to be so selfish to keep it to myself?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
other people can benefit by me putting out the gifts that have been given to me. If
It's
I have this
medicine.
innate
It's
to drive
medicine.
and desire to do something, it might be because it's more than just me. It's bigger and we're all connected. And
Yeah.
the more we're connected and the more we share and the more we show up and the more, who am I not to
Yeah.
do this?
Well,
And
it's true.
that totally flipped at me because I kept having this resistance that why would I do coaching? Why would I want to do
Yeah.
this?
I
Isn't
remember you saying
you know,
something
like
like that. Yeah.
there's like it's a getting to be a really dirty world out there. And it's like I
Yeah.
don't want to be in any sort of realm where I'm not in full integrity. And I
Yeah.
mean that
Same
not in a
here.
buzzword way. Like
No, I
I
know what you mean. Same,
literally
same
want to
here.
be transparent, open, helpful, and really like nurturing and bringing people in and giving them the opportunity and the possibility, but also doing it in a way that it's sustainable and that I can grow and that
Yeah.
I can provide for my family. I can provide for now I have a team of people who are helping me and I'm providing for them. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Abundance, money is not
Yeah.
pie. The more I have
Yeah.
doesn't mean the less you have. And once
That's
all of this
right.
came together, yes, there is something about your mindset that makes all the difference in the world on how we succeed. But it doesn't mean that you're less than something because you haven't succeeded
Of
yet.
course not. Of course not. And that's the thing that like I toyed with the idea because it's so hard to know like what do I call myself? And in some regard, it's totally just a procrastinating branding thing, right? You're just kind of wasting time. But I also know that when I use the phrase like money mindset mentor, for example, because what I like to do is all of the five stages, like the creating, sharing, selling, scaling, and receiving from creative work. That's
Mhm.
all related to money in some way. It's just like my creative lens of that, right? But what I don't like about that term, similar to our conversation about the word manifesting, is because it places it in this one lane.
Mhm.
And that to me, it's like your mindset. I would be more inclined to say like your experience impacts what you will move on to create. But even then, I want people like you can get everything right. And it doesn't mean that it is just going to be bestowed upon you. Because guess what? Like life happens sometimes, you know, and this is not, I hate the idea of somebody thinking like, oh, I did all the stuff. Like I did the affirmations, the buzzwords, all these things that like are not actually that effective if you don't have that type of brain. Like I hate to say it, right? No, like
Right?
that's one of the annoying sciencey things that like here I am like a thorn in somebody's butt, but like it's not going to work for you if it's not going to work for you. But
Right.
people then turn it on themselves. We take this idea of radical responsibility, right? I'm sure you've heard that buzzing around. And on one hand, yes, we do need to be pulled out of a victim state of mind. Absolutely. Like we have ownership and agency, but we almost take radical responsibility so far that we forget that we are actively co-creating. And I know you can go as woo for that as you want. You can say co-creating with the universe, if that's your spiritual belief, or you can also just say like co-creating with reality, because sometimes you're going to stub your toe, right? And it's not because you've got a block about whatever moving forward. It's because somebody moved the table, right? Like it's not all your fault, but you need to find that balance between radical responsibility and allowing yourself to like weave energies that want to happen too. Like I have an entire module about this. We call it the weaver work because I think there's what I want to happen. But one of the things that helped me most in my business was when I started tuning into like, okay, what wants to happen right now? And I know as creatives, we can
That's
do that.
beautiful.
We can
Yeah.
tap into like what project is like on my shoulder constantly right now. That's a sign, and you can say, oh, it's coming from my brain. Well, who cares? Like, however you envision these things, what wants to happen, I think it's equal play in that equation. And then you can take a much lighter view of building your business. Like I help people kind of tap into the spirit of their business, for lack of a better term. And you can take that to mean like woo stuff, or you can take that to mean like just psychologically, if my business were an entity that I was working with, how would it feel about me right now? Like what questions would it have? Would it feel welcome? Would it feel pressured? And all of these things, they're psychological tools that allow you to step out of like your situated point of view and like kind of see the forest for the trees again.
I mean, that's probably what everyone's listening right now needs, is to be able to take a step back a little bit and see the bigger
It's hard
picture.
though. It's
It
hard.
is. I've been so stuck in the weeds so much. And like, there's
Yeah.
always this, devil and angel and pulling at me. But when you finally get to that point where you can say, okay, I've been here enough times to know this is part of the path. This is how
That's just it.
keep
It's not an
evolving.
obstacle.
It's
Yeah.
not, it's part of the path. And as long as I can see consistent growth, and it doesn't have to be massive growth,
Yeah.
it can be
Yeah.
microscopic growth. And I'm not just talking about monetary growth.
No, it could be inner growth.
Inner
Your
growth.
realizations, your
Yeah.
awareness, that is growth. One of the things that I really like to, like, we harp on this a lot in CMA, which is information is support. And you can look at that as like support from the universe, or you can look at that as like knowledge and wisdom support. So if I do something and I learn, like, it just goes wrong, like belly up, failure, awful idea. If I learn something from that, though, that is supportive information for me. So I actually have no problem saying to myself, like, everything is actually trying to help me. And I don't mean like it has an entity that's expressing on me, but I have no problem being like, yeah, that, like, I had a really bad injury last year. I remember we were talking about that, like I broke my jaw, and that objectively sucked. I could not talk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, all of these things. But if you put it on the perspective of like, okay, what am I getting from this though that I wouldn't otherwise? Well, I'll tell you, I learned really freaking quickly how much I like to communicate, like, and how that's important to my well-being. Like I pretty much spiraled, understandably so.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, it's not me saying, oh, everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that. Some things just happen. The universe is chaotic, and that's okay.
Yes.
I think it's more about like, what am I going to do with the thing that is happening? Because right now
there
I have
you
a
go.
choice.
That's what's tangible, instead of
exactly.
What can I do?
What can I do with
I mean, like,
it?
even I think, well, see, for the listeners, Jess and I met because we both signed up for a coaching program that turned out to not deliver exactly what it was promising. And yeah, even though we invested a lot of money, I think we walked away from it, instead of feeling bitter, resentful, and demanding our money back or whatever, some people
God,
be
no.
that way. I know that there were people in there that found it incredibly valuable. Maybe a lot of people who did not find it a lot of value in it. I personally, what I took away from it was a better self-awareness of myself.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Information is support. It is invaluable to know what is not for you.
Right.
And it is invaluable to know, okay, within my own integrity, I sure as hell won't be showing up like XYZ. Right. Or within my integrity for my business or my structure or whatever, however I want to grow this generative thing, here are my requirements. Here's what's going in my business garden.
Yes,
right? Like a friend of mine, Steph Pfizer Coleman, I'm sure you probably know Steph. We talk about this a lot. She's an artist as well. And I think she gave me the term, or we were talking about this term of like a business garden. And like, what goes in that? You get to pick. You get to pick everything. And sometimes those really crappy experiences, like we've all had them. We've all bought the thing where we're like, yay, and then you get in there. Yeah. But it's just, you learn discernment, right? You learn the buzzwords, you learn the times. I try to help people tap into like, are you investing in a thing because like it is going to help you understand more of yourself, for example, or is it because that person has something that you think you need, that like a FOMO-y situation, right? Like those are two different things. And it does, like, it's just like walking that creative path. It takes experience to recognize like, oh, yep, looking back, maybe I only bought it to find what wasn't for me. And it has to be okay.
Or like, to meet somebody like Jess Keating, and then
there you go, right? Like I would have paid that money to have this like partnership, right? This like buddy relationship. Exactly. So
yeah,
it's all it all comes out in the wash.
I love that, like really kind of like reframing what's happening. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't allow us to feel what we're gonna feel.
Never gaslight yourself.
But we can
gaslighting is awful.
Gaslight. Don't even gaslight yourself. If you feel sad, allow yourself to feel sad. If you're disappointed, allow yourself to be disappointed. There were so many years that I felt so disappointed by my art career.
Yeah.
But even in that struggle, I didn't quit. And I just kept saying, okay, what can I do? How can I shift gears again? How can I pivot again? Because I knew I wanted it bad enough. I was willing to wait out all of the
Yeah.
things I needed to learn to bring me to where I am now. And
It's a
that
lot of
doesn't end.
discomfort.
It
Yeah.
doesn't end, because even last year, I'm moving into this year, switching the name of the podcast, realigning
Yeah.
myself
Big
with
stuff.
where I wanted to go, and just getting more clarity. And I still know that that clarity is going to keep unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the name of the podcast of what it was is still very relevant to who I am, but how I want to be able to share with other people, you know, how they can make a remarkable life around a business around their life, really,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
why I've like made this huge shift. I wanted to just go back a little bit about, you're still writing. I know you've still
Yep.
been recently published. You have books that are, I mean, like for a long time I was collecting children's books, but you do have some science children's books that are
I
really
do.
cool. I love that. What else have you written? Tell
I've
me
written
more about like
pretty
the
much,
whole writing.
yeah, a little bit of everything, honestly. And it really, looking back, I can see that I was trying to do the thing where I could like find my thing. Do you know what I mean? And now I know, now I can fully embrace. And I kind of alluded to this before where it was like, okay, am I over here? Am I over here? The minute I recognize that my ability to traverse all of those fields and realms is a skill set. Like, not everybody can do that. Not everybody has the background to do that. Not everybody has the context to do that. The minute I realized that, that's when pretty much everything kind of clicked into place. And I was like, oh, I'm the person who can play in all these lanes. You know, people have like their lane. My lane is how all of the lanes connect, right? Like the spiritual lane, the creative soul stuff, the body, the science, the mission stuff, building a business and all of that. But with writing, I did not even realize that what I would do is I would write in one category or one genre, and then I would like I learn things very quickly. I'm not going to say I master them, but I learn them to the point that I can keep doing them again and again. And
Right.
it's very consistent work, and that's lovely. And then I would move on. So in my writing career, I have written picture books, nonfiction picture books, novels. I have illustrated a set of graphic novels because I was like, I wanted, that was when I was like quietly in the closet about being like an artist. And then one day, like it just hit me. I was like, you have to stop hiding this. And like I got that out there. I have tried to work for every genre or age category that I can find. And then what happened was very similar to when I woke up like 10, 15 years ago. I pretty much on a dime decided I need to be like a creative professionally. Like I knew I wanted to be a writer. I knew I wanted to do stuff like this. I was wrapping up my like graduate degree. I was going to be a professor, like I was going to be a science prof. And I love every step of it. I don't regret a single thing because again, this is an edge. But I woke up one day and it was like I sat up in bed and I was like, I think I want to write books. And I'd always been a reader. And of course, like you have the conversation with parents, like, yeah, I'm gonna give up this like 80K a year, like, you know, business or whatever, being like a prof or something to try to be a full-time creative. And that's how I got into that. But then fast forward X amount of years, you know, I feel like I've done so much within that industry that I knew that something else was calling me, right? That next step down that path. And that's when people had always said to me, like, you know, you have been kind of coaching and mentoring on the sly for years. Do you know what I mean? Like I was just kind of that person that people would
Yeah.
come to and we would talk about like,
Raising my hand, right?
yeah, like
Like that's always been my role.
it's so funny how it's an epiphany for us and everybody's like, oh yeah, that's, you didn't know that. You're like, yeah. So that's
Right.
what happened again. And I woke up and I was like, I feel like I want to do something. Like I felt like my skin was like breaking apart. Like I should also premise this with, I had a near death experience that prompted that kind of shift where like I thought I was toast. And then when I was no longer toast, it was kind of that, like everything kind of rearranges in your brain when that
For
happens. Like,
sure.
I don't know if it's a fever or what it is, but when that happens, like your outlook's a bit different. And I knew like, okay, I think it's finally time to take everything, meaning the science work, the nature stuff that I weave into the work that I do, the creativity, the writing, the business building, all of that stuff, and bring that all together. And rather than saying like, oh, here's my little lane, which again, not to like negate the power of having a little lane, like that is really powerful too. But for me, it was really hard to embrace my lane is how these lanes fit together and how
Mhm.
you can use your, like you can work with your body, you can work with your creative spirit, you can work with like money healing and all of these really beautiful things that are normally kind of disparate silos or lanes. You know, like it's pretty rare to have access to all of those little playgrounds. At least I would say in a strategic way. So you don't feel like you're just like bouncing all over the place.
Right.
So
The
I took six
strategy part
months.
is
Yeah.
really fascinating to me, how it all
Yeah.
comes together strategically. I've been kind of working on something where I really want to be able to help creatives see all those facets.
Mhm.
And I had one of my clients that I was helping last year tell me, she's like, at the end of it, the last coaching session, she's like, well, you're like a prism. You've
Yeah,
taken light and broken it apart into all these rainbow missiles. So I can
yeah,
see all the parts of me and then bring it back together in white light and be able to create something that's wholly unique and herself.
that's
And so
beautiful.
I am not the light, but I love the fact that I could
No,
be
but you're holding it up and you're twisting it around.
right,
Yeah,
that I could be a prism to her own multifaceted life, and be able to not just, okay, now I'm going to teach art, or I'm going to make art and put
yeah,
it in galleries, or I'm going to do
yeah.
this, to take all those elements of nature and spirituality and everything. And she was able to put it together into something that felt very holistically her. And so I see what you're saying, and that's a very hard thing to do, because I
It
hear
is.
this, probably the number one thing I hear from creatives over and over: how do I decide what to do? Well, yes, there's only so much energy that we can expend
Yeah,
daily. So it's
yeah.
not like I can be a sculptor and a painter and a professor and a money healer or whatever. Like
And a
it all these things.
DJ.
It's gotta be, and a DJ, and then also on the side to have my organic garden,
Yeah,
whatever,
we
um,
gotta outsource some.
plant healing business. Like I get it. We have a bunch of things, but how do we bring that together more is like something I'm very passionate about. And I love that you address that. It doesn't have to be all one thing, but there is a way to take all those things and connect them more
Yes.
so
And
that
I
we
would go
build
so
something more
far,
beautiful for ourselves.
it's true. And like, I would go so far to say that most people, 99% of people who are feeling like, oh, this is too much, like these things that keep on coming up within me to like kind of begging to be expressed, those people feeling like this is too much, I would say like 99% of the time, it's not. In fact, I'd argue it's probably not enough, right? Like I would ask people to, listening to ask themselves, like, what rules do I have around what I will and will not express? When the number one thing that I often find in people is like, oh, well, I can't do that because it won't make me money. It won't make sense for my brand. It won't make whatever. Like they will look at how they would look from somebody else's point of view and judge themselves. Right. And I would argue that the minute you start doing that, you are quite literally emotionally leaving what makes you special. Like you got I use the phrase like, keep your feet under you. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the minute you start your feet, you go like, I'm going to go and imagine my feet are going to go under Kellee right now. And imagine, how is she seeing me right now? Oh my God, what if she thinks I'm this? What if she thinks I'm this? Like, no wonder I'm off balance. My feet are under somebody else. Right. And
Mm,
if there's something like, it's going to take time and experience to kind of sniff out. But I'm sure like you've gotten to the place where you can tell the difference between a really good idea, but one that is asking to be expressed. Like, do you know what I mean? Or like something that keeps coming back again and again, like the little ideas on your shoulder. That's how when I was writing more, that's how it happened for me is I would hear a voice in my head just repeating a line from a book or something. And there was almost this like smarm of like, are you really going to keep ignoring me? Because I'm not going anywhere. Right.
right.
And that's kind of what happens with like my creative business ideas. Like my entire program basically was that, except it was like 10 different voices all saying like, here's how we can all work together. And me being like, hold the hell on. Like, this is too much. Right. Because what
But
happens
you
one,
but you figured it out. That's
yeah, I
the thing.
did, but
It took
it
time.
took time. And I
This is
want to
me
emphasize,
too.
like, it wasn't me forced. I could have forced it if that, like, I could have been like, put something down that makes sense. But it was truly a really beautiful, like, my business model is a very nature-based model. But it's literally like a wheel, right? Of, time and of growth. The way I see my program, I only say this because I want everybody to see their offerings with the same love and reverence that I do. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but that will only happen if you allow it to come through in the way that's right for you. I had to really disregard I'll give a really clear example. The idea of a value ladder, right? Like we've all heard of these things, like have the little thing and then the bigger thing, and the big, like, and it can work. I know some people that have them. I've worked with people that have them. I understand what's going on. But for me, I know like there's two things going on. My science brain is going on when I think about the concept of a value ladder, and it has certain interpretations of that word. And then the more spiritual perspective. And I realized for me, in my business and in my integrity, I do not want people energetically or emotionally feeling like they have to defy gravity to reach me. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like like,
Right.
because we can feel that happening where it's like, oh God, I'm investing $2, but now, oh no, like that to me, like I'm getting chills because I know for me it's wrong. And that doesn't mean it's bad, but allowing
And that's
myself,
not how you wanted to build your
right. But
business.
I really struggled with that. because
Yeah.
I am somebody, again, like the scientist brain is like, okay, it's always looking for evidence. And I want to say, like, even if you're not a scientist, your brain is always looking for evidence
Yes,
of what works,
absolutely.
right? And like that's human, that's great. But you also have to catch yourself and be like, again, it's in the world of business, and especially creative business, you can make anything work. You can. And it's just a case of finding your version of that that doesn't make you feel like crap, that doesn't make you look at your business and be like, what stranger numbskull built this thing, right? Like you want it to be an expression of you. So
Right.
the minute I gave myself permission to be like, you know what? No freaking value ladders. I want to offer value in this way. And I don't even want to think of it like value. I want to think of it as like planting seeds. And if people want to work with me, it's either going to be super, super cheap or it's going to be this program. But it actually took time for me to accept that because I felt that tightness and fear of like, oh, well, it's going to look different from whatever. Like, I don't even know who I'm comparing myself to, but it's there. Right.
Yeah.
But
That's one
it's
of my
only kind of knowing yourself and having almost those emblems. Like you mentioned, like when you think of your business, it's a certain way. And when I think of my business, it's like this kind of wheel that I'm taking, like a spiral that I'm taking people through. Having those emblems, it isn't just a really like fun thing to do. It's not like a vision board exercise. It's something that's so deeply connected to you and nobody can change it or take it away. And the minute you start like strategically infusing that into how you actually build this thing, like the work you're offering or whatever, that is where I think our conversation of ease can come into play. Because it's not easy, but it's a hell of a lot easier than pretending that something else is working emotionally. You know what I mean?
exactly. I mean, society, the business models, the coaching industry tells us this is how we build a business. And
Yeah.
there's this
Yeah.
one plan,
And
right?
there's a lot of white dudes that have like their stuff sorted out. And it's like, if that works for you, buddy, like have at, but it makes me feel like puking.
Right, right.
Like
So this is my favorite thing to work with people, and even for myself, is like, how can you completely reimagine how business works? We're done with the 9 to 5 cubicle, but why would you come home and build a business that makes you still feel like you're in a 9 to 5 cubicle? Why are you modeling after
So
everything
here's the
else
thing
that's
though,
out
and I
there?
want to point this out. That is like the perfect question because the answer is the immediate why would I do that is because that is homeostasis for me or whoever. That
Yeah,
is your nervous system being like, this is what feels safe. So we don't even realize we're building these new boxes. So,
right.
like, one of my favorite questions is, how would I do this if I didn't know how anybody else did it? How would I do
Very
this if I
good
didn't know what I
point.
should be doing? Right. Like, if I didn't have like a Google thing that I could go and search or pay somebody to do this, what would feel right to me? And like, you will likely find if that question is new for you, like as a listener right now, you will probably not know where to go with that. Right. Like, you're going to be like, well, I don't know. Because here's the thing, as people, especially creatives, like, I believe we all have this like innate creator wound, which involves the making of the stuff, the share, like being visible, all of that stuff, money stuff. It's all related. I truly believe that most of us have not fully got a handle on what we want. And I'm not saying we don't know in there somewhere, but we have a lot of digging and excavating and shedding of like crap, like traumas and blocks and stuff to actually say to ourselves, this is what I want. And I think that that process, it's funny because I actually believe you could just focus on that process of shedding those parts of yourself. And I really think that if you did that and just allowed yourself like a pen and a paper, you would get to the place in business that you want to be just by doing that work, like just by
Yeah,
taking that step. And that's not to say it's going to magically appear, but like those inchworm steps,
yeah,
that's
for
enough.
sure. I am actually carefully and deliberately working on a program to help people uncover those blocks and figure
Yeah.
out what their deepest desire is to create something that's uniquely them. But I'm still in the process of pulling it out of myself, which
It
is
takes so much time. Like that's my program, right? Like all of
yeah.
these layers and all of these blocks. But like what is beautiful about it is we will have entirely different lenses through which we find
Mhm.
these things.
Yeah.
Right. And like, and I want to emphasize that because like I could look at you as a competitor, right? But like we understand as creatives, and I'll be like a super nerd here. If you have a forest and you plant all of the same tree, right? Like all evergreen trees, that is called a monoculture. And as a rule, monocultures do not survive, right? Because we need biodiversity.
Right.
Biodiversity is the thing that saves the planet all the time. And we know that the more species there are in a given ecosystem, the more it's going to thrive. And I want people to be able to understand, like, if you are looking at, whatever you're doing and thinking, oh, but it looks like who am I to be a painter? Because there's 1,000 painters. Who am I to be a coach, right? Like we both kind of help people do creative-y, businessy, whatever things,
Yeah.
but we employ it in such a different way. I make you stronger and you make me stronger. And because of that, we make our people stronger. And
Right.
all of those communities kind of coexist. We don't want a monoculture in anything we're doing. We want this like beautiful, life-giving diversity. And that is where like conversations of like, oh, well, this is how it works. So this is how you need to build a funnel. It's like all I hear now, I've trained myself so well, I just hear like monoculture. like it's gonna die if I do the same thing that doesn't feel right. Because normally it's not gonna feel
Exactly.
right. You're not a business person, you're a creative. And now you're moving into business. And I think
Oh,
that's why a lot of business
perfect.
advice sucks. Like, but most, I think I have it on my sales page. Like, if you are a creative soul, most business advice is going to feel like just warmed up dog crap to you because they're
Sure.
focusing on you as a business person. Some white dude, guaranteed, some white dude wrote a book and was like, here's what's happening in business. And like
And
Nike
they
does it or
do. They,
whatever.
from
Yeah. And it might work for them. And if you feel, and I also want to point out, if some of that information feels good for you, run with it. Like it is
yes,
probably
of
the path
course,
of
if
least
it feels
resistance.
right.
Yeah, but don't force yourself into a box that's like gross to you because it is going to be something. I guess I just want to say, like, you not only have permission to do what feels best for you in your body and in your soul, but like you are encouraged to do that. And just because Joe Blow says, like, there's how it works, like, he is not speaking to you. You are a creative who is doing business. You are not a business person who's trying to be creative. You can't separate your creativity and that creative soul. But most business advice will feel like crap. And that's literally why I exist. That's why I have a program because I recognize like, oh, creatives are different.
Creatives are totally different.
We are, and it's not a dig to like non-creatives. The world needs diversity, but like we are motivated. A really good example of this is this idea of service, right? Like if you're in a business, you have to serve people. And like, don't get me wrong, I love helping people. I
Mm.
love serving people, but that is not why I'm in business. I'm in business because my creative soul is like, we need to do this. And
Mm.
that's honestly where the conversation ends. Then I have to move ahead and be like, okay, how can I frame this so that people understand what I'm doing? How can I, what do I charge? All of these normal 3D world questions. But this idea of like, oh, I'm serving. I'm not waking up every day and being like, I'm so excited to serve. I'm waking up every day feeling like I can't wait to explore blank. And
Yeah.
I really believe like I know creatives that feel a sense of shame about that. They're like, oh, well, I don't feel like the same way that other business people do. It's like, that's okay.
That's actually probably good as we have
Right? Like you have a
uncovered because a
fire
lot of the
in
business
you.
practices are unhealthy
Yeah.
or
Unethical.
manipulative, or,
Boring.
unsustainable, whatever, however we want to like really dive into, and there are some really good prominent business coaches out there, very well known from Marie Forleo to, whichever one that you're following. And I know a lot of people who walked away and felt like they learned something from it. So it's
Yep.
not like
Yep.
it's not
Absolutely.
good stuff. But one thing that I keep coming back to the same thing as you over and over again. They're teaching it from a business point of view.
Yep. And
And
that's fine. It's
that's
just
fine.
as a
But
creative.
where's the space for our creative friends? Where are all these people that I've grown up with over the last
Yeah. Yeah.
10 decade of being on Instagram and watched everyone progress, and some people progress faster, some people are like still stuck like, oh shit, I built this thing,
Yeah.
but now how am I going to make money with it? Which is,
Yeah.
my favorite person to say, hey, let's make it more like you and
Yeah.
more in a way that works for you, and then let me help you communicate it, because that's really all selling and marketing
That's
is
all it is.
communicating.
Messaging and strategy.
it's
Messaging and
just
strategy.
it's
Yeah.
just showing up with your full on heart, and it's vulnerable and it's scary,
It
but
is.
honestly, that's how you build a beautiful business with integrity. And that's my favorite thing to do. And that's why there's all these creatives that are like, I don't know, and then they take these courses, and for the majority of them it doesn't work because
Yeah.
the way
And then
creative
they blame
work
themselves.
is different. Yeah, they think
Yeah.
it's themselves, and it's not you. Whoever's listening right now, it's
It's
not
not
you.
you.
You've listened to all the good guru advice out there, and there's some really good stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Gary Vee fan, I admit. I got on the Gary Vee bandwagon, but that's because he's not trying to sell me anything except for his soul.
Yeah.
But but when it comes to actually implementing it as a creative, it's just a completely different
It is.
beast. And that's how my brain works, is like, okay, so how can I extrapolate from what the professionals, the gurus,
Yeah.
the celebrity entrepreneurs have to say, and make it more realistic for us creatives, that we come from a probably a more emotional base.
Yep.
For some of us, it's
Yep.
science-based, but
Hope so,
emotionally.
right?
And yeah, you are creative, so you understand
I
all of
am
it.
absolutely, I am nothing if not a creative.
I mean, I think actually scientists have to be extraordinarily
Well,
creative.
that's the thing. Like we talk about these things as though like it's binary, but science and creativity or spirituality, to me, it's the exact same thing. It's different lenses. They're both trying to ask and answer questions. That's
Right.
all it is. They're just
Yeah.
trying to do the asking and the answering in different ways. And the minute again, allowing myself to be like, oh, that's what I am. Like I'm just an explorer here. And my skill set is being able to take the bird's eye view and be like, here's the ecosystem you need to build your ecosystem. When
Yes.
you mention like where is the space for like these creatives who want to build something with their message and their voice, we're building it.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and I think it's really
Or if they
important to
don't know how to
remember.
use their message and their voice and they've already
Exactly.
started building it.
Yeah.
But it's like, really, where's the fun adventure? Put the puzzle together. Like you have this brilliant idea. And I know you've read Elizabeth Gilbert at all. I love
Yes. Yeah.
magic. And I love how she
Yeah.
talks about the muse that comes, plants the idea. And if you don't take it and run with it, that
Yep.
muse is going to go somewhere else. But
I've seen it happen to me.
I've seen it happen too. And I'm like, wait, oh,
A
dang.
best-selling book, and you're like, wow, okay, got
Yeah, I have that
it.
idea too. But you know what? There's nothing new under the sun. But when something comes to you and you have this spark of an idea, I had this crazy, crazy idea for marketing my course that I just put out, an art course. I had this crazy idea for like, how can I make this bigger and more fun? I've never seen anyone do this before, but I'm going
Do
with
it.
it anyway. And that's what I want the listener to know, that these budding entrepreneurs that are creatives that have this idea, like if you're like, oh my gosh, that's so weird, nobody's doing that, maybe I shouldn't do it.
That's a good sign.
I
And
just
that's
want
the
you to
thing though,
do
like
it.
I want people to do it, but I want them to remember that like there is a process and a path that you can strategically walk to make yourself feel safer doing it. Because
Right.
one of the things I've noticed is like business people are lovely, whatever. Like I married one, like he's great. He's not like creative soul invested in the work or whatever, does a job, he's happy with it. I'm cut a little different. But as creatives, I've found it almost means that we inherently care more about the stuff we're doing because we feel like it's like we're birthing a part of ourselves, right? Like, what's
We
that old
are.
line? Like, oh, how to be a writer, you open up a vein and bleed. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, buddy. Like, that's a little intense, right? Like, we have all these ideas about
Yeah.
like pouring our soul out and all of these things.
The
And again, I
tortured
think it's about
artists, the
tortured
starving
art, like starving
artists.
artists. Like I'm here to, if anything, I'm here to embody the fact that you do not need to be tortured or starving. You can make tons of money and like be creative and it's all okay. Nobody's going to come and hunt you down. Like but it's remembering that these things that we see as obstacles, like all of the blocks, like there's millions of them that I walk people through and stuff. All of those blocks aren't actually blocks. I just use that term because people get what it means, right? Those
Mhm.
are the doorways. And every single time you can strategically almost like metabolize because there's energy in that block. And you can take that from the spiritual, like the woo land, or you can think of it just like nervous system energy. When you have the like epiphany moment, right? Like when you said, oh, who am I to keep this to myself? That energy is moving in you now, right?
Right.
Like that's a shift energetically and emotionally happening. All of these things that people feel of like, oh, I'm second guessing myself, or like I'm hustling too much, I'm burning out, all of those so-called blocks, if you get eyes on them, which is why I use that term all the time, like just get eyes on it, you can metabolize that. And with that, that will literally power your next step down the path. So like don't be afraid of like, oh my God, but I have so many hurdles and blocks and snags and this and that. Like the more blocked you feel, the more energy is waiting there to be that like propeller for you forward. And it's okay that you care a lot. It's okay that you're looking around and being like, I feel like I'm trying to like tear my heart out and put it on a sales page or something. Like that's okay. And there are ways to learn to do this work where you don't feel like you're leaving your beating heart on the internet, but it does feel authentic, right? Like it's
Exactly.
all experience, but I wish that I could just like, blah.
Yeah. Well, and I understand where you're coming from, especially because, we have a great idea. We think it's coming back full circle to the beginning. We think it's supposed to be easy. It's
Yeah.
just that we want to be able to do it with ease. It's not going to be easy. It's going to
Yes.
take a long
Yeah.
time. So I really have relied on mentors and I have hired coaches and very thoughtfully and making sure that they're speaking my same language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has made a difference in propelling me forward. And if at the times where I couldn't afford something fancier, just finding community made a huge
Yeah.
difference. Those
Yeah.
connections, bouncing those ideas off of other people really helps you like reflect back what's going on in yourself, if it's a healthy relationship, let's just say that.
Yeah, for sure.
We know that, like, I'm just talking about in those situations where I've found my people, my community, my circle, and I just feel so excited to be able to show up like people like you, Jess, and show up and talk about things I'm passionate about. Then you hear it all come and you're like, it actually moves me through those blocks to get to the other side to say, oh, okay, now I see where I was stuck. And it doesn't mean that, well, where's the obstacle is the way? What is that from?
Gosh, I have no idea. It's been on a cross stitch for decades, though, and millennia. Probably like a Sun Tzu or something.
So don't let it stop you from that big audacious dream. So I'm going to end with that. Jess, tell me what your big audacious dream is at the moment, right here in 2023.
I have so many. My main focus, my big audacious dream for 2023 is trying to get as many aligned and within integrity souls into my Creative Money Awakening, because that is at this moment and will likely continue to be the only place to work with me in terms of like a live context, that supportive community. I don't do one-to-one. I don't do I'm leaning into my skill set. It's not that I don't love one-to-one and I don't have great feedback from it. It's just, I know where I'm most needed. So I have that amazing program that we're building every day. I am also going to be launching a YouTube channel coming up this year. All of that fun stuff, right? Like I want to share more of this stuff, of these little snippets of conversation and stuff to make it a little bit more palatable and a little bit more digestible, because I know there's a lot of people sharing like motivation, right? Like do the thing. And like that to me falls short. And what I don't like is it can kind of be weaponized, like the gratitude, right? That we were talking about, where it's like, oh, well, I'm trying to do the thing, but like I'm self-sabotaging, I'm being human, I'm procrastinating, like I have these millions of things that are piling up. Like I like helping people take really tangible, actionable, digestible little baby steps, like interim steps is what we call them in my community. And I would love to create more free content just around that stuff, so that no matter where people are at, again, like there's no value ladders to be seen in my world. I want it to be like an open garden door. You walk in, you're like, oh, look at all these little fun things. And like, that's going to be my MO for 2023.
Yes. Anything like wild and off the cuff, like maybe a big exotic vacation?
Oh gosh. So we went to Ireland not too long ago. We went when it was a little cold, and that was fine. I love cold vacations. I'm not a hot weather soul.
Me too.
Not a big fan.
You're in Toronto, so that's probably
I am. Yeah. Like I was born in it. They say, like, what's that Bain thing? Like, you merely adopted the cold. I was born to it. Yeah, that's my world. I think audacious vacations. Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. We have been eyeballing a trip, maybe Australia, New Zealand at some point, but that's like a big one. I've been there once before, but my husband hasn't. So maybe something like that. But I think for the most part, it's going to be tending the home space. Tending the home space. Like, I don't know if you can tell in my background, I just set up this like lovely wall here. Some of those IKEA frames, they don't even have art in them yet. So like, that is what needs to happen next. I just put it up on the weekend.
Well, I'm going to guess that you could probably pick a lot of amazing art from all of our listeners.
Darn right. Yes. Find me on Instagram. Jess Keating.
There you go.
Send me your artwork. Send me your links.
and to find you, you're at Jess Keating Books, correct? Yeah. And they can find you on your website where?
That is jesskeating.com. I send out a weekly epic email with all sorts. Again, if you like these conversations, get on the epic email list. Yeah. It's some of the best in the business that I'm really proud of. And you can join Money Awakening, of course, my CMA program. And I also have a Facebook group called Wild Wealth Circle, which I will welcome you with open arms. And that's all absolutely free.
Yay! I love it, Jess. Thank you so much. Like, this has been awakening.
We need to do it again.
We'll do it again tomorrow. I'm sure you'll see Jess and I chatting a lot more in the coming future. So thank you again, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you for having me.